Max?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
He said he's here.
Okay. Before we get started with anything then, I will ask for a motion that committee members on Zoom be allowed to participate and vote in this meeting. Do I have a motion? Motion and second. All right. All in favor of allowing our Zoom committee members to vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. All right. With that, we're going to move into number 2 on our agenda. And today we're going to be giving a presentation by Whit Blatton, Forward Pinellas Executive Director. I'm very excited to have you here. Thank you.
All right, it's great to be here. Thank you.
You did a great job at last week's meeting, by the way. I was watching on YouTube.
Oh.
He always does a good job.
I'm having to deal with a lot of little crises lately.
Is that any different from any other time I've known you?
Yeah, God, but yeah, you are always having crises.
Welcome to transportation. Who's not an expert in transportation? That's usually the fun week. Well, good afternoon. Let me do a little bit of introduction of myself. I'm Whit Blanton, and with me is Nushin Rahman, who is also of our staff. She's principal planner and handles a lot of our multimodal and special projects and grants and partnerships. Just a little bit about me. I've been the executive director of Forward Pinellas for almost 9 years. 9 years next month. Nobody's counting, but 9 years next month. And before that, I was a consultant for 27 years based in Orlando, where I worked all over the country. And I was PSTA and the NPO's consultant since 1989 or 1988, some way back then. So I've seen a lot of changes happen in the county. And do we have our presentation loaded up?
Yes, it is.
Okay. There we go. All right. So let's see. Just a little bit about Pinellas County. And what I'm going to emphasize today is the partnership that we have with PSTA, how we work, how we align our resources, our plans to make things happen. And we are the planning agency that handles land use planning countywide and transportation planning countywide. And PSTA does its own planning as well. There's a planning committee. But PSTA is also a main operator of public transit services. So we've got to go hand in hand in delivering good transportation. Just looking at this graph, you can see the cats that we have fund herding. There are 25 local governments here in Pinellas County, as many of you know. There's about 1 million people almost. We're second in the state in manufacturing jobs. We also have about 15 to 18 million tourists who come each year. This is the real key here, though, is we're projecting another 120,000 permanent residents, full-time residents living here in Pinellas County. That's in addition to all the seasonal residents we get. We have about 80,000 new jobs we're projecting. And if you're like a lot of people, you're wondering where are those people going to go and how are we going to manage all that? Because we are the most densely populated county in the state of Florida and we don't have any real vacant land. So we're going to have to build up. We're planning for growth and development and density in the right corridor, such as the US 19 corridor, the Sunrunner corridor, and the Central Avenue corridor. And Alt 19 is another one that we're looking at. So I just put a bunch of bullet points here, and I'm just going to briefly touch on each one of these. But these are the things that we're hearing from the public. This is what we're hearing from elected officials, things that we're seeing as we look at transportation statewide and how it affects Pinellas County. One is the Tampa Bay region is very rapidly growing. It is an economic powerhouse. Yet we have a very substandard public transportation system in all 3 counties. That's just a historical bias as we've developed around the automobile over decades, but we're far behind Orlando in terms of some of the transit and transportation infrastructure they have. In order to remain competitive with a younger workforce, with people moving into our area, people who have choices of where they can live, we need to build out that transit network somehow, some way across the region. So we're really looking at bringing Brightline over to the Tampa Bay area from Orlando, which would connect to West Palm and Miami, but also Amtrak service. It's been about 30 years since Amtrak served Pinellas County, last in 1984, and Amtrak has a desire to expand service in the I-4 corridor, and they see the I-4 corridor as having 2 different markets, one for Brightline and one for Amtrak at different price points. Maintaining our statewide lead in higher wage jobs. So we just finished a project called the Target Employment Industrial Land Study to look at how we preserve our high wage jobs here. And if you think about it, if people can't afford housing in this county, then they're going to move to another county where they can afford it, and then eventually the workers are going to say, you know, why are we here? We need to be where the workforce is and where the workers are, and we might see some shifting of jobs away from us if we can't provide affordable housing. Tapping into our tourism growth, this is a huge economic driver as well. Although the jobs in the tourism industry don't pay real well, tourists pay real well, and they come here and they spend a lot of money in our hotels and our restaurants, and that cycles back through the economy in all kinds of ways. But tourism is fickle. If you have a bad experience visiting somewhere, are you going to go back? If you're stuck in gridlock and don't have transportation options, are you going to go back? And younger tourists want to go where they have options. Probably older people do too, but you know, younger people tend to want to go vacation in places where they don't have to drive a car. Here, you pretty much have to rent or drive a car. I mentioned housing supply and cost. We do have a housing action plan that we are working on with our partners. We're rolling out a regulatory toolkit on how to reduce some of the regulatory barriers that make housing less affordable. But dealing with all that is also means dealing with the Florida legislature, because they love preemptions and to tell local governments what they can and can't do. One of the latest preemptions is something called the Live Local Act and its predecessor bills that were signed into law, which essentially says local government, you cannot stop housing being built in your commercial and industrial areas. Well, that puts a real pressure on our higher wage job preservation, because if we're turning industrial and commercial areas over to housing, we're losing that job base. And we're not going to get the industrial jobs back because they need a certain kind of space and a certain kind of function. So it's all a delicate balancing act. Technology is another big issue. Technology in the form of signal technology, in the form of artificial intelligence, adaptive control of vehicle technology, maybe not yet autonomous, but we're getting there. All these things can help make our roads more efficient and have more throughput of traffic in corridors, but it also gives people options to not having to drive and go to meetings. Since the pandemic, we're all using technology to have more efficient meetings without having to drive everywhere, this being an exception. And you know, that's kind of nice for people. I have a lot fewer meetings than I used to before 2020. And then finally is aligning our efforts regionally. And you may have heard that we are in discussions with Hillsborough and Pasco to form a regional metropolitan planning organization that would do our job that we're doing here in Pinellas, but expand it and strengthen it regionally. There's an organization just like ours in the other two counties. Well, not just like ours. They don't have all the powers that we do, but they do most of the basic functions. And you know, there seems to be a good momentum and some political leverage to create that regional organization. The balance we have is that we don't want to forget about what we're doing locally, and a lot of the planning and project implementation that we do on transportation in particular is pretty granular, and it requires a local focus and local buy-in. So we're going to have to work at two scales, a regional scale and a local scale. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. I may have covered some of this, but we are two legal agencies branded as Forward Pinellas. Forward Pinellas is a fictitious name. We like it. I didn't want to go through life as a slash, PPC/NPO. But one is created in state statutes, that's the Pinellas Planning Council, and then the MPO is a federally created agency that also has state statutes. And our job is really to address the transportation needs through the MPO and the land use needs through the PPC, but I don't want the public to make that distinction. I just want them to say, hey, Forward Pinellas is on the job, they're working at it, they're making progress. I don't want our staff to worry about what am I working on. I mean, there's timesheets and whatnot, but our staff now collaborate very well between the two agencies. When I was hired as executive director, they didn't know each other. They hardly talked, and there was no real synergy, and we really tried to foster that spirit of collaboration. So what we do at the PPC is a little bit different than what we do at the MPO. The PPC is a recommending body to the Board of County Commissioners. We create rules, we create policies, we enable local governments to take advantage of certain policies and programs. For instance, we've enabled higher density development on our major commercial corridors, such as 19 and Alt 19 and East Bay, Roosevelt, because we've called them investment corridors, and we then modified our policies for these investment corridors to allow for redevelopment to go up 5, 6, 7 stories. We really set a pretty high cap. Before we made that change, we had an artificial cap on 50% of allowable density in Pinellas County because we were very afraid that density was going to make our traffic really bad. And there's some truth that when you add density, there will be more trips and people traveling, but it's diminishing compared to single-family residential neighborhoods. Multifamily apartments have fewer trips per unit than a single-family home does. The more density you get, the more economy of scale you get. The more public transit and mass transit become viable. The more walking and bicycling becomes viable. So density should be embraced rather than put at arm's length. But that's what we did for 30 years is we put density at arm's length. So we've now changed that policy. But we can't force those decisions on local governments. All we can say is, here's a platter, we've made this for you, take what you will, within the platter. And many of them do that. On the MPO side, we can dictate, and we don't like to say the word dictate, that's not a good word, but we are the final decision maker on transportation. We don't have to go and ask the county commission for approval. We just make the decision and we tell the Florida Department of Transportation that's our priority, and they're required by law to follow our priorities. They don't have to follow them 100%, but if it's on the state highway and we make it a priority, they have to follow it. If it's off system, we can't use state money on non-state roads, but we can use federal money. So we have flexibility in how that gets applied. Let's see, here we go. So our board is right now 13 members. I won't go into all the representation, but they represent the population of Pinellas County. We have a number of advisory committees, just like you all. We have a bicycle pedestrian advisory committee, a citizens advisory committee, and I would encourage you all to investigate those, and if you're interested, be a part of it. Our board meets on the second Wednesday of the month at 1 o'clock. We do have a PSTA voting member of our board. It's Gina Driscoll, who's the chair of the PSTA board from St. Petersburg. As we discuss the regional MPO and forming that, one of the discussions we're going to have this coming Friday here in this room is whether the public transportation entities in Pinellas County should have a voting seat on the regional MPO. It's the Hillsborough MPO's opinion that they should not. We're going to see how that discussion goes. Again, right now, we all have that, but everybody's fighting for the number of seats they can get, and so that's part of the discussion. So our partnership with PSTA is really the meat of this presentation, and I think it's really important to think about how we have different roles and responsibilities, but we still work together. Our job is to really make sure that we're taking full advantage of what PSTA is trying to accomplish and making it a priority, and aligning those priorities. PSTA is going through a community bus plan analysis right now. What comes out of that effort presumably will be some route changes, and schedule changes, and service changes. If there is a desire for any expansion of service or any additional capital equipment, like more vehicle purchases or electric charging stations or an intermodal center of some kind, then we will work to prioritize those for federal and state funding. And that partnership is critical. We have been identified as a best practice around the state of how we work together. And I'll tell you, that's not always been the case. For a long time in the 80s and 90s and maybe early 2000s, our two agencies had very different project priorities and viewpoints. The MPO at that time was advancing a monorail plan, and the leadership at PSTA had zero interest in the monorail plan. And the monorail plan ultimately was derailed because the county commission chose not to fund it, not because PSTA didn't want to be a part of it, but I got to think if we were more aligned, it would have been harder for the county commission to oppose that. And I'm not here to say the monorail was a great idea. I'm just, that's how we get things done, is by working together and having a unified front. What we are working on is to strengthen our investment corridors. And I used that term earlier, but these are largely commercial roadways in Pinellas County. 66th Street's a good example. You know, roads that are just lined with commercial businesses and parking lots and retail. What's happened to retail in the last 20 years? Well, the internet has changed everything. The pandemic changed a lot, the recession changed a lot, and you don't see as many brick and mortar retail stores as you used to. People are doing a lot of online shopping. They don't need the parking footprint they needed in the 80s and the 70s, and yet they still have the parking footprint. That's where our affordable housing and mixed income housing can go, and our higher density development can go, because we've got underutilized parking and underutilized buildings. And if we're reducing some of the regulatory hurdles, then that could be where we see some of the redevelopment happening. And I'm not talking high-rise development, just 3-4 story buildings at a walkable scale, and then plan around that, and make your transit stop your hub. And then you'll have more people around the transit to take advantage of the transit. So that's part of the philosophy. So we did a transit system plan that we're continuing to refine. It's aligning with the community bus plan that PSTA is working on. The difference is ours is more strategic and tied to land use and looking 20 and 30 years out. PSTA's is more operationally oriented and looking a little more at like 5 to 10 years out. And I think that difference in scale is actually a good thing, because it means we keep the vision and that long-range focus, and then how do we fill that with incremental steps on the operation side. The Alton-Keene corridor is one of our, I think, current successes. Even though we aren't yet implementing any new service out there, we adopted a redevelopment and transit strategy plan for the Alton-Keene corridor to tie the Sunrunner on the south end to downtown Clearwater on the north end. So it's that southern section of Alton-Keene. And there's a lot of jobs in that corridor, especially in downtown Clearwater, where you have a lot of medical-related jobs, soon to be fewer county employees in a couple of years, but that's redevelopment opportunity. And along that whole corridor, you do have a lot of jobs in both manufacturing and in retail. And then it's an opportunity for housing. So we wanted to connect housing that's affordable with jobs and job training. So St. Pete College and places like that are also along the corridor. PSTA is now in the next step of that planning effort, which is what's called a transit corridor. What is it, TCAR?
Oh, wait, is it TCPE now?
Yeah, transit
An
corridor.
alternatives
Concepts,
review.
Alternatives concept.
It's hard to keep
yeah.
track of all these acronyms.
Anyway, it is a detailed look at the operational and capital needs of improving transit in the corridor at a more detailed level than we looked at. And it might entail things like transit signal priority for the buses, to extend the green time so they can get through traffic signals and stay on time. Things like queue jump lanes at intersection, where the bus could go to the very front, and then the light turns green, the bus goes first, and gets in front of all the traffic queue. Those are just concepts that we could look at. Enhanced station areas, more buses, more frequency. The idea would be to begin with limited stop express service in the corridor, such as what PSTA is rolling out now in the 34th Street corridor in the next few months. And so what we want to do with our local government partners is make sure that whether it's the city of Largo or the city of Seminole or the city of Clearwater or wherever, that they are thinking about ridership and they're thinking about transit as they look at redevelopment plans. So why require developers on a major transit line to build 2 parking spaces for every residential unit? Maybe on a major transit line, you only need 1 parking space for every unit, or 1.5 parking spaces. I mean, just kind of think about how parking informs transportation choices. Those would be some of the tools in the toolbox that we could consider. We are also prioritizing electric vehicles and vehicle charging equipment, and we allocate $1.5 million every year in our on our priorities list and in our transportation improvement program, specifically for PSTA to use to acquire the vehicles and the electric charging equipment. We're thinking of increasing that amount in the coming year to $2 million a year because we're getting a little bit more funding as a result of the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act. In addition, we've been a key partner in the community bus plan. We've provided comments. We've responded to the survey. And we see an opportunity with that community bus plan to build ridership, to grow the system, and to strengthen these investment corridors that I mentioned. And finally, waterborne transportation. We're a county surrounded by water. The bay has always been a barrier to getting around, but we do have the Cross Bay Ferry, and in Clearwater, we have the Clearwater Ferry that serves the beach, downtown, and the city of Dunedin. Before the pandemic, that was regular transit service. Since 2020, it's been a reservation-based service, so it's not been regular. And we have PSTA actually won a $655,000 grant that needs to be matched 50% by the local government partners, creating a little over 1.2 million that would go for a 3-year plan to resume regular ferry service between Clearwater, Dunedin, and the beach. We think once it's on a regular schedule, administered by PSTA, we'll see increases in ridership, and the reporting for that ridership will come back in the form of additional revenues to PSTA, because ridership is part of the formula that you get in your federal funding. So there's lots of opportunity. The Cross Bay Ferry, the St. Pete Chamber is actually looking at the Cross Bay Ferry going back and forth directly to South Shore area of Hillsborough County, Apollo Beach, and that area, to bring workforce people over to downtown St. Pete. Because if you tried to drive around South Hillsborough County with all the growth, it takes a long time to get even to downtown Tampa. And a 30-minute ferry ride across the bay might be faster than driving to downtown Tampa. There's going to be some capital and other things that are associated with that, but it's an opportunity that we can look at a few years down the road. I talked about the Alt-19 plan. I probably should have looked at these slides earlier, and I wouldn't have gone out of order. But I'm really excited about Advantage Alt-19 because it's already a high ridership corridor with the Route 18. And unfortunately, it just takes a long time to go the entire length of it on a bus. So by introducing the limited stop express service, we'd like to see that travel time reduced substantially. I don't know how much we're going to reduce it, but it might be as much as 45 minutes faster, depending on how many stops we end up with. The more stops you have, the longer it takes, the fewer stops, the less time it takes. And that's why redevelopment around those stops, those station areas, is critically important. And what we've seen when this service has been implemented in other parts of the country is that riders gravitate to the higher frequency express stops, and they stop using the lower volume frequent local stops. And so you see, a little bit of a gravitation over to those major stops because people value their time. And so that's what we'd like to see introduced here. So we're not going to get rid of the local, we're just going to introduce this faster service on top of it. And we are working very closely with the city of Largo on where those station areas are, and that's the first step in the implementation planning that we're undertaking. And we just signed a work order with a consultant to begin working on that land use side of it in conjunction with PSTA's operations side. The Gateway Master Plan is another plan that we've done, and now that's moving into the next phase. It covers a 30-mile area around the St. Pete Clearwater International Airport. This is part of the Gateway Master Plan area. So is the new county building or facility area that'll be located at the ICOT Center on Ulmerton Road. So if you're familiar with that area, it's 20 acres they purchased. It's underutilized by a lot. There'll soon be 3,000 workers at that location. So we want to plan for that as a mixed use with housing, with retail, with workers in that one location, and that makes it ready for transit. So the Gateway Master Plan is a 30-year plan. What we're working on are pieces of it to begin realizing some of the vision. One of the big things that we're debating is where should an intermodal center be in this area that serves regional transit coming over from the Howard Franklin Bridge, but also connects to where that county building's going to be and Carillon and some of those places. We don't have a location yet. The Florida Department of Transportation really doesn't want to buy something on spec, so we want to work with a developer who sees the value of building a transit center into their development. And they'll get higher density development from us if they do that. They'll be able to maximize some revenue, and they can make their bottom line better. We just need to find the right developer who's willing to do that. And then the Florida DOT will help us fund it. So we wouldn't put that on the developer, we'd fund it. We just need the land. Finally, let's talk about the Sunrunner. So PSTA did a wonderful job executing the grant to make Sunrunner operational. It is, I won't say gold-plated or anything like that, but it is high value for the money invested. It's working like it should be, and I've seen BRT operations around the country. This is exemplary. It is very good service. It's not without its flaws, but it's very good service. We've partnered with PSTA in the city of St. Pete, and now the city of South Pasadena, believe it or not, to work on transit-oriented development around those station areas. And the city of St. Pete is advancing the station area plan for 22nd Street Station. And that's already gone to review by their development review committee. It'll be going to city council this coming month. After they get through the gas plant district redevelopment for the Tropicana Field site. But gradually, what we're building is that development intensity around the Sunrunner stations that will create ridership over time, that will create destinations over time. And the power of trans-oriented development is amazing when it's executed well. And I think we're on the right path to begin executing this well. And you may remember South Pasadena opposed the Sunrunner project. They wrote a letter saying, we don't want it. They have it, it came, and they're making the best of it, but they really want redevelopment. South Pasadena wants investment in their commercial properties along Pasadena Avenue. And so we're now beginning to work with them on the TOD plan for the South Pasadena area. We'll see if St. Pete Beach comes on board. Maybe someday. But we'll keep pushing, they're benefiting from the service, so. But these are opportunities for us to continue to work together, and I'm excited about that. Our long-range plan goes out to 2050, and even I might not be around by 2050, but what we're hoping for is that this plan continues the bold vision that we've had for how Pinellas County can grow and evolve its transportation network, and we build it in increments of 5 years. So even though the horizon is 2050, the plan is built around what are we doing by 2030, 2035, 2040, based on the revenues that we anticipate coming in. And we had a meeting yesterday on our future revenues in one area that we get federal funds. It's called Surface Transportation Block Grant Funds. And block grants are incredibly flexible. We can use that for almost anything. And if I remember right, we'll be getting in the 5 years from 25 to 30, roughly $120 million in block grant funds, which is an enormous opportunity. And I just mentioned we give PSTA $1.5 million a year. So that's a lot more than that over a 5-year period. And we can use that for all kinds of safe streets. We can use it for planning grants. We can use it for capital construction of bike lanes, of sidewalks, all kinds of things, safe crossings of roads, which all makes transit more usable for people if it's safe and you can walk around places. So transportation projects have to be in this long-range plan to be eligible for state and federal funding. We have 2 components. We have a financially feasible plan, and we have a needs plan, which is more of a wish list. It's okay if it's in the needs plan, but it's really good if it's in the financially feasible plan. We're not assuming like new taxes. We're assuming basically the revenue stream we have today, plus the renewal of the local option gas tax that exists today. But we're not assuming that the county will increase the gas tax. We're not assuming that there'll be a new sales tax. There could be, but we need to be realistic in what we project. So there's a lot that goes into this, and I don't want to be misleading people by assuming we're having all this revenue coming in when we can't support that. So the adoption schedule is we're really kind of in the thick of it right now. So we did our population employment projections, we identified needs. Now we're projecting those revenues, as I mentioned, and looking at what that is. And then in the spring, summer, and fall, we're going to be balancing out those costs and projects. And that's really the heavy lifting that we're doing right now. And we have to adopt the plan by October of this year. Again, so these are the population projections. We expect to be over 1 million people. We expect to have about 670,000 jobs in this county, and you can see the increases there. So we do a lot of outreach. We had statistically valid surveys of what the public would like to see. This is every resident in Pinellas County had an opportunity to respond, and we have a high level of confidence, a 95% level of confidence. More than 70% of our respondents would like to see lower speeds for safer streets. That's good for transit. Having a variety of land uses within a 10-minute walk, that's good for transit. Overwhelming support, 70% strongly favor that. 20% of our population would never take transit. Nope, not interested, that's fine. That's 80% who are interested, who are willing. And 50% would take it if it would get them around more quickly and more efficiently. So I think there's a perception out there that transit is unreliable, that transit is slow, and that's not true. I lived on Route 65. It was super convenient for me to get in and out of downtown. I think the concern maybe is when you have to transfer multiple times. But most people have that perception having never set foot on a bus. So people want options for how they want to get around, and that was approved. 64% would like to see improved transportation options for regional destinations. So, people don't like driving the Howard Franklin Bridge or the Courtney Campbell Causeway or even the Gandy. So our next steps are really to look at where those priorities are for transportation investment based on revenues. And again, we're going to put that in 5-year bands of time. So what's our priority for 2030, 2035, 2040, and so on. And all will be continuing to coordinate with PSTA on that. At some point, maybe we'll see some form of rail in Pinellas County. I think the first step is getting to Tampa and showing what that's capable of doing. And then maybe someday we'll be able to work with CSX to do something with the CSX lines that exist here in the county. So here is my contact information. I would encourage you all to reach out, send me an email, reach out to any of our staff at Fort Pinellas. And I'm happy if there's time to answer any questions.
All right, so let's remember that, there's a lot of us, we're gonna be asking a lot of questions. Please wait till you're called on to be asked, ask your question, and then we're gonna move on to the next person after that. Now, I saw that Max online had a question. He had his hand up first. Are you there? 1, 2, no? Okay.
I saw him sign in, but I guess not.
Okay.
Why don't you combine PSTA with ARP?
With Hart?
Why don't you combine PSTA with ARP?
Well, it's not my decision to do. That was looked
Well, I
at.
know that, but,
Why shouldn't we consider it?
yeah.
I don't know why we shouldn't consider it. I think anything should be on the table if there's a savings and value added. I have looked at the merger of transit systems before as a consultant. I looked at Sarasota and Manatee and merging those into one system. And what my analysis showed 20 years ago is that there was no cost savings for doing it, that if you really wanted to accelerate better service, then there was value in doing it. If you really wanted to invest and have better service for the 2-county area, it might make sense to merge. But if you were doing it just to save money, don't do it, because this cost savings, you'd have one fewer CEO, you would have maybe a combined marketing department, you would have maybe a combined planning department, but neither of them had many of those staff.
But don't you open up the other opportunities for the travel?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You would break down some of the barriers getting between the counties. You might have better service, but that takes money to invest in. And neither agency on its own has the money to invest in. So you'd have to have a commitment for finding a new revenue stream to support that. That was my recommendation 20 years ago, and I think that would be the same today, looking at Hart and PSTA. There's just not a lot of margin for either of those systems. Here's the other thing. PSTA runs a very efficient operation based on the revenues they have. Hart has less revenue available in a much bigger service area, so they are stretched much more thinly, and their population is growing much more rapidly, and it's spreading further out. So there's a lot more pressure on Hart to deliver good service than there is on PSTA. And that seems like an apples to oranges comparison right now. So I think unless you can figure out how to balance those two out, I don't know if it makes sense right now for PSTA. Just my 2 cents.
Okay, I'm gonna go next and then we'll go over to Gloria. When you mentioned earlier about Amtrak coming into Pinellas County, you know, there used to be the joke that if you missed the train in St. Petersburg, don't worry, take a taxi over to Tampa, you're gonna beat the train there. Would we still be looking at a train route that goes over the top of Tampa Bay, coming all the way down into St. Petersburg?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So the CSX tracks aren't going anywhere.
That's true.
But they are also substandard to operate passenger service, because the freight trains go at, what, 12 miles an hour?
Yes, it seems like it.
Yeah. So you'd have to upgrade the tracks. CSX is not going to pay for that, so we would have to spend millions and millions of dollars to upgrade the track. We'd probably have to double track it, because they would not want their freight to be, as few trains as they operate, they would not want them to be delayed by any passenger.
Yes.
Right, okay?
That was the other part
So
of
a
it.
lot of money would be sunk into that, and it's an indirect route.
Yes.
It'd be great for Oldsmar,
Yeah,
but it's an indirect route.
yeah,
The better bet, I think, would be going right over the Howard Franklin Bridge. When the
Right.
new bridge is built, it's gonna be built to withstand technology up to light rail. Now, not a heavy commuter locomotive train. So you couldn't run Brightline as it exists today all the way across the Howard Franklin Bridge.
right.
But you could run Brightline to, say, the Tampa International Airport, or to Ybor, or downtown, and then you could have another train that's a different type that would go from that location. And DOT's building the Howard Franklin Bridge to support that.
Right. And that brings me to my next question. When you talked about a multimodal center somewhere along Ulmerton Road, you know, in a little bit here, we're going to be seeing a presentation that already has a map with the Ulmerton Road Transit Center on it, but it would be closer to US 19. Could a light rail train somehow go down Ulmerton Road from the Howard Franklin to US 19?
Sure, that's just engineering.
Wonderful.
I mean, you'd have to lay some tracks, but, and it won't be cheap.
No.
So, you know, that's the political will that sometimes is tough.
Okay.
Our elected officials have a 4-year horizon,
Yeah.
sometimes less.
That.
Yeah.
And this would need to have a 30-year vision.
Okay, because of time, we're going to have Gloria ask the last question, but if you have any other questions or comments to Whit, his contact information is on the screen, and you can be able to email him and communicate that way, and I'm sure he would have a problem with that.
Or send
I'm
it to
happy
me and
share
I'll
my
pass it
res-
along.
I'm happy to share my responses with Bob.
Wonderful. Gloria?
Well, I think it tied with some of what, you know, you were saying about the politicians having a short view, and consumers do too. Some of that information, again, was wonderful, the survey that you did. How does that information get out to the public? Because the more that the public knows that there's acceptance of transit, and that transit is good, and that planning is good, and that we're doing all those things, then there'll be more buy-in to it, I think.
That's the forever question. I mean, it relates to everything. So we write blog posts, we put things out on the web, we go around and give presentations, we share this information. We have a little one-page fact sheet of the survey results. We've had public records requests of this survey because people didn't believe it. It was like, here's the survey. So I think just continuing that drumbeat of talking to people and letting them know people want choices. But, you know, I was in Clearwater yesterday, and I had the mayor, who just got elected, tell me that the project we were talking about was Drew Street, and
Yeah.
converting it for safety. He said, it's incredibly unpopular, nobody wants it. And that's not true. I mean, I was around when the planning study was done, I was very supportive. The way you word the question can yield the answer.
Yeah,
So the
absolutely.
mayor put some questionnaires out there that were very one-sided and negative about Drew Street, and of course, people are going, don't take my lane away. But if he couched it in a bit different context, you might have had a completely different response. So that's the challenge with these surveys, and you're right, they lose their freshness after a couple of years. I've had people tell me that any plan I developed in 2019 is invalid because of the pandemic. You know, some of the people who come to the PSTA board meetings have said that. And that's not true. Plans need to account for things like unusual circumstances, like market forces changing, like the stock market failure and the crash, you know, but things come back and they endure, and you just got to have that persistence of vision. Thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Okay, with that, we're going to move down our agenda to item number 3, and that's public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? If yes, please stand up, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. Okay. Next on the agenda is the chairperson's report. So I would just like to give you a brief recap of what happened at the April PSTA board meeting. The board voted to approve a contract for construction management services with HGR for the Clearwater Transit Center project. There was also a presentation given by PSTA's Chief Financial Officer on the fiscal year 2025 budget assumptions. And additionally, while I have your attention, I think I have noted that I'm part of Car Free St. Pete. I just wanted to add that we had a presentation the other day from the committee trying to transfer I-175 from a highway into a boulevard. And that would be tied into the project that's going on at the gas plant, historic gas plant site, to be more cohesive with the south side. And they're looking for public input on that. So if that's something that you would like to chime in with, go right forward. I can provide you the link or send it over to Bob. With that, we're going to move on to item number 5, and that's the Forward Pinellas report from Elizabeth.
He was great.
Yeah, that's right.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Yeah, no,
actually.
absolutely, that's
And
right.
I did learn something, what he was saying, I actually took notes on it. The second talk, Chelsea was doing, she had a priority list. And she talked about funding. When a plan is made and studies have been done, then it becomes funded. And it goes on a list, and Chelsea went down 25 different things, and some things would fall off, and some things would get bumped up higher, because FDOT only has a certain amount of money, so bump that stuff higher, so that they'll spend the money on that stuff before they run out. But then she talked about just what he was saying, 25 municipalities, and you probably remember how he phrased it. You can't tell them what to pick and choose. You have to entice them to pick a project. It looks good. It'll help everybody out. You want to pick that one? And then it's up to the municipalities to say, sure, we'll fund that. We'll be behind that. We'll pick that. And that pushes that up higher on the priorities list. But he was just saying the same thing. You can't tell the cities what to do and projects to pick. You have to wait for them to get interested and decide for themselves what. And the whole meeting is all these fantastic projects going on. I'm just overwhelmed at those meetings. They talked a lot about Belcher and Route 60. I learned that even though you think there's a solution, fix it right here at this point. Yeah, but it's going to affect the front end and back end. So you have to look at the bigger picture. Oh, okay. So then you have to go back, and that's why that Belcher and 60 has been on the list for years. Because if you tweak it here, it's going to explode over here and over there. And so that's part of learning what Fort Pinellas does. Oh, and then another presentation after Chelsea, a fellow got up, was talking about the bridges on US 19 and how now it's a highway, but we're killing businesses on either side because you've got this tremendous highway dividing it. And he was talking about how people raise crossings and crosswalks. There are 3 different ways to do it. And he had photos, and he was describing it in very creative ways to combat the dying out of businesses alongside US 19. You know, bring those businesses back. People can cross back and forth across US 19. All those 3 different ways that he took these great pictures of. It's about enjoying the advantage of the nice new highway, but keeping alive all the businesses on either side of the road. He spent a lot of time on that. Like I say, I am learning a lot. So,
All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Any questions for Elizabeth? Okay. Did you have a question? No, okay. All right, with that, we're gonna move on to number 6, which is our action item for today, which was to approve the first quarter minutes for 2024 from January, February, March, and April. Can we have a motion to accept the minutes as they are presented?
Motion.
From Roman, and second from Terry. All in favor? And any opposed?
Aye.
We'll take that as a yes. And any opposed again? No, no, good. Okay, so now we're gonna move into our information items. First, Amanda's gonna be speaking to us today about our website redesign.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, good evening. I'm Amanda Baird. I am your Director of Communications and Marketing. I am here with a short and sweet little update info item for you about PSTA's website. So we are, just to set the stage a little bit, our current website, psta.net, as you know and love it today, was launched back in 2017. So far in fiscal year 24, we've had 274,000 plus visitors. That number was pulled last week, so more since then. And with an average of 44,000 people coming to the website every month. Those are sets of eyeballs, not recurring visitors. So 44,000 bodies, eyeballs, looking at the website every month. Each person is coming to the website on average 3 or 4 times. About 71% of that traffic, if not more, on a monthly basis, is on mobile devices. So our riders, folks looking for schedules, sometimes our board members pulling up agendas and meetings much like this one, all happening on mobile devices. And also on our website, we've got about 500 pages of information contained within our current website as it stands today. So we recently issued an RFP to redesign and rebuild our website. Some of the reasons we've decided to do that, the clicker will click. Okay. Couple of reasons we've decided to proceed with this redesign and rebuild process. Just like any other piece of technology or a bus in the yard, a website has a useful life. And ours has served us valiantly since 2017, so it's reaching the end of its useful life. It is time for a new website. Most website useful life is about 2 to 5 years, so we have worked really hard. Our website has been a workhorse for us. Some of the elements of our website redesign and rebuild scope are based on the changes in the technology. PSTA's website is currently hosted in this building, which means if we lose power or network in this building, our website goes down. As we learned 2 weeks ago when a truck took out one of the power lines, the power poles outside of our building lost internet, building lost power, PSTA.net went down. So part of our scope is to move that hosting off-site and into the cloud, which will create that resiliency element for us, as well as creating a level of security that we simply can't replicate here on site. So that is one key element that our IT team and I are collaborating on, as well as just simplifying some of that back-end maintenance. So those updates that these web companies like to release all the time, making sure that it's all in a modern and useful platform that is updating as efficiently as possible. In addition to our technology needs, we've got some communications and branding needs. I like to say that our website is second only to our buses and bus stops out in the county as our most visible element of our brand. It's the thing that people see most frequently, right after those buses on the road. So it's really important that we're putting our best foot forward on this platform. A key part of that is making sure that we are getting updates and messaging out as efficiently as possible and in an intuitive way with an information architecture that makes sense. So when you get onto that website, whether it's on your computer at home, on your phone, connected to Wi-Fi or on your phone out at a bus stop where you might not have a super reliable connection, that the website is loading quickly, that the information is located in a place that makes complete and total sense. So we prioritized that information architecture as a key element of our scope. A part of that as well is search engine optimization. So when folks are Googling information about us, we are the most authoritative source on information about our own services, and we are always ranking at the top of those search results, which is something that we can do with a well-designed website. That's what Google looks for when it's trying to find information and answers to questions that people are asking. And most importantly, the most important element of this new website redesign and rebuild process is going to be user experience. And that, like I said, 44,000 people a month are coming to our website to look for information. Many of those are riders like yourselves. We've also got key community stakeholders. We've got folks like Forward Pinellas who are coming to our website for information on our services. We've got our board members, our county commission, our 25 government municipalities, all of our partners for UPass programs, colleges, universities, Pinellas County schools, making sure all of those users have a great and intuitive user experience. Another core element of that will be ADA compliance. There are some accessibility requirements for screen readers and keyboard navigation, color contrast, making sure that the website works as intuitively as possible for every person who visits it. So that's kind of the why. This is what I'm allowed to tell you about the procurement plan so far because the RFP is in progress at the moment. So we are still in what our highly motivated procurement director calls the cone of silence. So this is what I am allowed to tell you is that the RFP is underway. We received 29 proposals, which is a large number of proposals. Each one is very long. We read them all. We held a selection committee meeting on May 2nd. That should say 2024, that is my mistake. And the award recommendations will come next month to the June Finance Committee meeting and board meeting. More exciting than the procurement process is what's gonna happen after that, once we award the contract. Within the scope is a really robust discovery process. And we will be coming back to you and to the board and to the various committees to serve as kind of focus groups, to tell us your hopes and dreams for a redesigned website. How do you use the website today? How can we better structure the information on there to serve your needs and the needs of riders like you? So we will be coming back to you throughout that discovery phase pretty robustly with whichever one of those 29 contractors happens to win. And then once we exit that discovery phase, we'll go into the design and build process, and we'll have additional opportunities for feedback and user testing, making sure that everything is working like it's supposed to, that everything makes sense, that the layout makes sense to you, and it's easy for you to find things. So we will be coming back to you to serve as our advisory committee, not only for our services, but also for our website. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, and who has any questions regarding the new and upcoming website, except for what's in the cone of silence? Roman?
Quick word, thank you for the presentation. So if this website was since 2017, so the content didn't much change since that time?
We've been updating the content. It's just the code, the build of
Right.
the website it was built in 2017.
So it's WordPress or what?
It's currently in a platform called Umbraco, which is
Uh-huh.
similar to WordPress, but it's a different open source.
And you're
content.
planning to have another open source, right?
That will be determined with the contractor once we award. The contractor is supposed to make recommendations for which content management system.
And will you come back to a track committee? Because I like what you said, that there will be testing, you would want to have feedback, so please definitely ask us. We sometimes help on other projects like that. That would be interesting.
Absolutely.
Anybody else with a question?
Peter's got
Peter
one.
Ray.
Peter on screen?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm wondering if they're doing SEO for some of the other search engines. I mean, I realize Google dominates, but there are other search engines, DuckDuckGo, that at least have a significant percentage of usage.
Yes, and a lot, so SEO is supposed to encompass all of those major search engines, Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo. And a lot of the best practices are pretty universal. Obviously, they each have their own proprietary algorithms, but some of those best practices, making sure information's tagged in a certain way that they can crawl it, is fairly universal. What's interesting also, to get a little bit geeky, is a lot of those best practices that those search algorithms look for are also ADA best practices, because that's how the screen readers read page, is using the same markers of data that the search engines use, so.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
I think it's today Google announced that they were finally implementing their artificial intelligence option, which allows a lot of complex queries instead of just kind of simple queries. Is that something that's in your planning, as to how to, I mean, I think bus planning and route planning may benefit from kind of complex queries.
Yeah, I have been keeping an eye on long tail keywords for a long time. I also got that update today. I am happy to chat with you about this offline.
Okay.
We are looking at some of the AI technologies that are coming on the market, especially with search algorithms as part of that SEO planning process. Yes.
Okay. And do we have any other?
We'll talk.
Do we have any other questions from here in the room regarding the website? Yes, Mark.
I should know this, but I don't. The only thing I use the website for is to download a current schedule for a certain route, and then it's in my phone, and hopefully it's updated. Yeah,
Yes.
I've blown it before with that, but do we currently have the ability to go on our website and buy fare?
We do not, because our fares are all, the fares, short answer is no. The long answer is you can load money to a Flamingo Fares account through flamingofares.com, which is linked from our website. Because we no longer have those physical Go cards, there's no way to purchase those online now.
I'm still behind the curve on our new setup, but I do travel a lot, and other counties' systems are a little easier,
Yeah.
in my opinion, currently, to buy fare. Like Tampa, they have some deal. I went on, you buy it, and it's on your phone. Then you get on the bus and you just show it to them, and it's good all day. It was very nice, and I didn't know. They taught me how to do it while I was traveling, but to me, I don't have to use it because I'm on the track committee now.
Yes.
But it's a bit of a hassle for some people, and so that's why I asked. I didn't know. I thought it might be a good idea if there was some way to buy something. Might increase our sales. I don't know.
Yeah, our Fair Media right now, we are kind of moving almost 100% to that, either Flamingo, open payments, or cash.
I respect
on the
it. I
bus.
just
So
didn't know.
that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you.
Okay, and it looks like Max Johnson online has a question. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat. I see the 2 and the 1 lit up there.
He was lit up before, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think it
Okay.
go away.
All right, with that, thank you, Amanda. And we look forward to hearing from you more as this goes forward and you come out of the cone of silence.
Thank you.
That's right. Yeah.
And with that, we're now going to move on to 7B, which is Jacob, and he's going to talk about our community bus plan, which proves to be probably very interesting.
Thank you. Oh, here we go. It took me a couple times pressing this sketch work. Thank you, Chair. Good. Hello, everybody. I'm Jacob Labutka, Planning Manager here at PSTA, and PSTA's Project Manager for the Community Bus Plan. A few months ago, there was a presentation with myself and a representative from our consultant team, Jarrett Walker and Associates, who walked you through the first phase of the community bus plan. You may recall there was public engagement effort and a survey to ask people trade-off questions like, would you rather some more service to go everywhere in a coverage model, or would you rather focus on key ridership corridors? So in any case, we concluded that first phase of engagement, and in February, we held what's called a core design retreat, where we worked with representatives from our consultant team, PSTA, cities from across the county, and Ford Pinellas to draw what we call a few conceptual networks to show and illustrate what networks that are more based on coverage and networks that are based on frequency might look like in our current operating environment. So I'll say that these are not necessarily recommendations, but they are tools to have a community conversation about what we are able to do in our operating environment within this phase that's going on through about June 7th that will ultimately inform the final phase of the plan, where we'll actually have draft recommendations informed by the community engagement from this phase. So just a recap of kind of the previous phase of engagement. So, we kind of are looking at things on a spectrum from more coverage-oriented services, where you try to, have service to as many different places as possible, but it may not be the most frequent service. Or you might look at what we call a frequency or ridership concept, where you would focus ridership on focus service on key corridors with higher frequency, but the trade-off of that is there are some places that would not have transit service. Our service stands today with the black star in the middle. About 60% of our resources are on some of those frequent corridors where we get a lot of our ridership. 3,500% of our resources are more in the coverage-oriented places, and 5% are duplication. So the two concept maps I'm going to talk about today, the coverage concept is about 50-50 divided between those two concepts, whereas the ridership concept is more 80% ridership and investing in frequent corridors, and 20% looking at more coverage-oriented services. So now we're going to get into the good stuff, actually talking about some of the map recommendations. So first up, we have what's called the coverage concept. So this largely looks very similar in some ways to today's services. So I'll note that for this map and the next, the legend on the right, the routes on these maps are illustrated, the frequency by color. So routes in red run every 15 minutes, blue every 30 minutes, green every 60 minutes. The brown routes are our limited express routes, and the yellow are our on-demand zones. So a few notable things we've done in this concept. We've expanded our on-demand zones. So currently we just have the one that operates today in Safety Harbor. So we, with the project team, in this concept have introduced a few additional zones that are replacing our lowest performing routes in terms of passengers per revenue hour, and are introducing the concept of having more on-demand zones. We've also done some streamlining of the routes, particularly in St. Pete, to where they operate fewer turns and operate just more straight in a way that makes sense. Some of those routes have been the same way since before I was alive. So this is a way for us to really adjust what I call those pre-Jacob routes. Not that that's official plan terminology, but in any case. So this is just at a high level what this concept looks like. So when you look at, and then also one other thing I'll note is that so there are fewer routes that are as frequent as they are today. So that's been taken and invested in other corridors to expand the coverage of services today. So that's kind of the trade-off I wanted to mention there. With the frequency concept, so you can see there are fewer of the green lines on the map. So all of the routes on this map are going to come pretty frequently. Most of these are every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes. Now, so the people that do have access to transit in this concept are going to have access to frequent and reliable transit. But of course, the trade-off on that is you lose a lot of that underlying coverage network. And so this really illustrates what is possible in our current funding environment. And in my opinion, a vision plan, kind of going off of what Whit was saying earlier, and many of these corridors are identified premium transit corridors that they are looking at in the long term. An ultimate vision plan would be being able to have this frequent network with the underlying coverage concept. But the focus of this planning effort is what is possible within our current operating environment. And so these are just to show what those concepts look like put out into practice. So some things that are in both of these concepts. So one is kind of a streamlining of some of the routes, particularly in St. Pete, those that turn in a lot of places. Two, there are new connections, more direct connections that are being provided. So for example, in the coverage concept, there's this Route 74 variant that provides a connection to the beach that doesn't exist today. And in both concepts, there are routes that directly connect downtown Clearwater to Town and Country in Tampa with a one-seat ride. So that exists in both concepts. That does not exist today. Another concept that is in both of these plans is to better stagger the departure times for the Jolly Trolley routes and the Suncoast Beach Trolley from downtown Clearwater, so you effectively have service every 15 minutes along Clearwater Beach. Today, they're not very well staggered. You might have a bus that leaves at 10 o'clock and another at 10:05, and so we could work with them to better align the schedules to have frequent beach service. And so those are some of the things that exist in both those plans. Oh, and one other thing is that every line on the map here has service 7 days a week. Now, the frequency does go down. So, for example, if a route runs every 15 minutes on Monday through Friday, because the routes here are just shown from frequency on a weekday. If it's every 15 minutes Monday through Friday, on Saturday it'll drop down every 30 minutes, and on Sunday it will be every 60 minutes. So it's obviously not the most frequent service. However, there are many routes that exist today that do not have any service on Sunday. So in both of these concepts, there is at least some service on most every route on the map 7 days a week. So a few exceptions or things I want to mention. So we did not make any modifications to the express routes, since that's definitely more of a regional conversation, and it's going to take a lot of resources to amp up those routes, if you'd say. So that's something we've largely left alone for the purposes of this exercise. In addition, a few questions we're asking ourselves in both concepts are around transfers. Two things that come to mind with that are how do we enhance transfers in downtown St. Pete? I think you'll all recall, once we got out of Williams Park, we kind of created the grid system in downtown St. Pete, but a consequence of that was it does make transferring between some routes a little more difficult than it was before. So we're working with the project team to try to find ways to enhance the connections in downtown St. Pete. You also heard Mark, you referenced it, the Almerton Transit Center concept that exists in both of these. So in designing the routes in the core design retreat, we certainly talked about the concept of the Gateway Intermodal Center that exists at a regional level, which for a lot of people was kind of more in this Carillon area here. But in the exercise of drawing the routes on the map, there would seem to be a more natural convergence point at what this node is, the Almerton Transit Center, at close to the intersection of Almerton and US 19. Adjacent to where that new county facility will be. So again, this is just a kind of a concept we want to, some of the concepts we want to flesh out through public engagement in this phase of the project. So I'm showing here a couple QR codes on the left for the survey, on the right for the project website with more information. And if you're like, what do I do with that silly QR code, because I occasionally have problems with them, we will get the information to Bob to send out the links afterwards if you don't feel like having to deal with that.
Yeah.
So in any case, happy to turn it back over to you and answer any questions you have.
All right, I have just a couple questions and then we're gonna go to Sebastian. Do you think that the final concept will look like a merger of the two proposals?
That's very likely. So I kind of asked that question of our consultant team who's done this work in many other places. So ultimately, to kind of go back to the spectrum slide, it often is, somewhere in the middle. And it could very well be what our allocation is today. But even if it's the exact same even if it's the exact same percentages as we have today, there are things that I mentioned that are in both plans we could, do to maybe redistribute service or increase efficiencies, no matter where we end up on the spectrum.
Okay, I liked what I saw. I looked at both maps. Somehow someone sent me a poster size of both of them over the weekend, and I may have spent my Sunday morning looking at it. Because I have, there's no football. And I liked in both, because I live off of 49th Street and 18th Avenue South, how it really connects all of South St. Pete, Gulfport, to Sunrunner stations, which is one of the big things I was pushing for in this. And I like how it also in both splits Route 52 and has it kind of 52 serves Almerton North, 49 serves Almerton South. And, that route's a big, long route. Yeah. But I think that by having it serve more of South St. Pete first, then go up, I think that's going to really help and get people more connected to a Sunrunner station. And then the last thing I had, because the little icon is covering over downtown St. Pete. I saw something else in the PowerPoint that said the possibility of a downtown St. Pete transit center. Is that correct?
So it's not necessarily a transit center, so the conversation is around how we handle transfers. So whether that's a transit center, whether that's on-street connections, I mean, realistically, I think just given the history with Williams Park, I don't know how popular a transit center will be at this time.
Right.
I mean, just in my opinion, not speaking for PSTA, I would love to see a transit center. But
Yeah.
realistically, I think, you know, especially in the near term, it's
Yeah.
probably, it's more feasible to facilitate on-street connections to where maybe you would take up a block of space and have, you know, 4 to 6 routes or so stop there to help facilitate connections.
Okay, so we're not going back in time to a Williams Park.
Not at this time. That's not to say that that's not something that could happen in the long term, but realistically, for the purposes of planning for these changes in the next 5 to 10 years, I think more realistically, we're looking at those, at least in my opinion, looking at those on-street connections. We will be having some additional engagement with some of the St. Pete committees, particularly the St. Pete PAC committee and the Complete Streets committee, where we're going to specifically talk about this issue.
One more question, and then I'm going to go over to Sebastian. Do you think that by the creation of an Ulmerton Road Transit Center, if it comes to fruition, would see the elimination, or, I don't like using the term elimination, but maybe merger into that and closing down the lay-by here in the Largo station up by Walmart?
No, I mean, that is a good question. I don't know if we would necessarily close down the station here, especially since in both concepts, they're still
Serving multiple lines.
serving both. I don't know why it's not going forward. Okay, anyway, just imagine you're seeing both concepts. And so I think there's still utility in having routes come here, especially since, you know, we can still maintain access for meetings if people have questions, need information from PSTA. So I don't even think we necessarily eliminate the need for the facility here, but perhaps there'd be reduced demand.
Got it. Okay,
Try it again, I think it might be working.
Oh, let's see. Take it. There we
There you
go. All right.
okay. Sebastian, you're up.
This sounds like a complaint, but it's not.
Oh, no, please. Go for it.
I understand you have a lot of community bus plan meetings.
Mhm.
It seems to me that everything is geared to downtown, the south side. And yet, the people that give us the hardest time are the north side people, okay? Why is it that you do not do more meetings up on the north side?
So I will say, in the previous phase of engagement, and so, no, that's something that we certainly heard in the last phase, that we tried to spread the love, if you will, as much as possible. So we did do a public meeting in Clearwater. I know we did a virtual meeting. We did, of course, do St. Pete engagements. I think we went to a farmer's market in Clearwater. So we did, and I think we also went to Safety Harbor.
Safety
Harbor
Harbor,
Nights.
yep.
So we do some North County events. So that being said, though, we certainly hear that comment, very valid comment. And we're currently, you know, right now beginning our public engagement phase our public engagement strategy for this phase. So actually, one of the lessons learned, and for me, wanting to spread the love a little bit, is in the last phase for particularly rider engagement, our public engagement consultant did a lot of like bus ride-alongs to directly engage with riders and let them know about that. So that actually wasn't the most successful in terms of getting a lot of responses and spreading the survey. And in addition, some of the public meetings we had weren't very well attended. So in this phase, we really want to reallocate resources and ensure that we're meeting the people where we're at. So for our rider engagement, I've emphasized more on going to transit centers across the county. So of course we'll hit, Grand Central and St. Pete and whatnot, but we'll also go to Park Street Terminal, Countryside Mall, Largo Transit Center, places like that. So we're making sure we're getting to as much of the county as possible. And in addition, we're also doing, we have a couple of events. We're doing an event on Madeira Beach, a few in Largo. So we're definitely making sure we're trying to get as much of the county as possible, including St. Pete, but not just St. Pete.
Thank you.
Of course, I thank you for the comment.
Anybody else have a question, or anybody online have a question? Go ahead.
Is this just for bus service?
Yes.
But because I received an email stating something about they were gonna cut out the Direct Connect program or something, is that?
That's not a conversation we've had at this time. In both of these concepts, we would still, Direct Connect program would still exist. So this is solely, yeah.
I don't really remember what it said,
Mhm.
because I read so many emails, I think, and I get old, you can't remember stuff.
Of course, no, I feel that.
Yeah, So is the Direct Connect program not gonna be, or is it gonna be?
Oh, it will be. No, in both of these concepts, the Direct Connect program would remain as is. This is solely looking at just bus service and what exists for the fund specifically for bus service.
Okay, I guess I'll have to go back and check.
Yeah, but please, if you can find that email and you could forward, you feel free to forward it to Bob, and I'd be happy to take a look at it.
Okay.
Anybody else with a question?
If I could just ask one more thing, so just make sure to take the survey and spread the word out to all of your contacts, your friends, your family, strangers on the street, whoever you want to tell about this. We definitely want to make sure we get the word out there since our engagement period is only through June 7th. And like I mentioned, we will send out the links and make sure I share it to Bob so it is sent to you all.
Awesome.
And feel free to email me at any time if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob.
Thank you all.
All right, that brings us to our member comments and other business. So this is the time when you can ask staff your questions about things that are going on out in your travels on the bus right now. Anything that you're seeing, what? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And, yeah, let's go from there. Elizabeth, you're up first.
Okay. We're getting the survey from Bayway Flex. And it doesn't make any sense. It wants us to compare apples, bananas, and oranges. Different species. You can't compare access that you have to do 24 hours ahead of time with mobility on demand and the bus. Now granted, some of us can take the bus, a lot of us can't take the buses, and they do need to depend on either make the 24-hour access or wait for that particular day and hope that they're gonna get an MOD. I've had bad experiences with MOD. They take over an hour, I'll call because I wait for an hour, and I'll call up and they'll say, oh, well, the driver will be there in 25 minutes. Cancel. Because, luckily I was in my neighborhood, so I could just go home. I couldn't go to my event, I had to go home. But you can't compare those three things. So I don't understand the survey that we're getting, and in fact, I got it again, and.
Yeah, I just got one
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
I
And that's
was
because of access, I think.
Yeah.
That's an access-related thing.
Yeah. And they're talking about would you spend $2 or $7 or $11? We're paying either $4.50 or $3.50. And I'm thinking, I don't know, two different agencies, and they all have their price points, but wouldn't it be nice if it was just $4 across the board? But I'm gonna give up mobility on demand. It's just not working out for
A
me.
little unreliable.
Yeah, super unreliable. Saturday, I waited for over an hour, he showed up, there was an ambulatory person in the front seat, and he had his walker in the back where I'm supposed to go. So the walker's off to the side, I get up in there, drop him off, and he gets another request. The driver gets a request for another pickup. He had to cancel it. Well, that
Was he
explained-
a wheelchair transport driver then at that point? Because
Yes.
that's part of, that's
Yeah,
part of
wheelchair.
with mobility on demand.
And he explained to me about how you start with access and then it overflows into wheelchair transport. And it just trickles down until flat out can't help us. There's not enough vehicles and drivers and time. And so I'm gonna give it up. I'm just gonna have to take the bus, which is an hour and a quarter to go downtown. I'd rather do that in an air-conditioned bus, because I can trust the buses, and I have to wait for mobility on demand that may never show up. And while I'm waiting, I'm missing the buses, and I can't, it's too late for me to do access. Just stay. So that survey confuses me. I don't know how you guys feel about it. But a lot of the questions don't make sense. And it looks like it applies to people in a bigger area than just Pinellas. There must be other parts of the country too.
I will tell you, out on the beach, it's excellent. 5 minutes. Live in a mobile home park. Whether it's Uber or Lyft, they're there in 5 minutes. Best service I've ever seen. So I think it's got to do with the area that you live in.
Well, and I think it has to do with wheelchairs.
Have you what?
Wheelchairs,
That's,
that's another thing.
I didn't want to bring that up,
Right.
but.
Right. But I'm a wheelchair person that can take the bus, so I am going to take the bus,
Gotcha.
because it's just not working out. During the winter, it was great, 10, 15 minutes, pick me up, go downtown, no problem. Then it was wait 10, 15 minutes, go home. But then it's spring, summer, and it's kind of strange, people are leaving town, they're going back up north. You think that there would be a shorter wait. It's counterintuitive. I don't know why, I can't explain that. But the waiting and or not coming and having to cancel, I'm just going back to the buses.
Can they put one of these in a regular car?
No, it's
No.
a 400-pound chair.
Right.
No way. No way.
Okay. Do we get anybody from staff?
I have a manual, but my
I've,
daughter's-
Elizabeth has already provided me with a printed copy of what she's saying, and that has already been forwarded to mobility.
Okay, so that's being, already
Yes.
being addressed.
And
Okay,
it'll
good.
be a lot more clear, instead of my rambling.
You were
This is
plenty
why
clear.
This is why I type.
edited it
Yes.
so many times.
Okay, anybody else have any questions, comments for staff that they would like to address at this time? Anything?
Just a comment. I've really enjoyed Mr. Blanton's presentation. I think he's right on the beam for long-term, near-term and long-term. And a lot of great points that I only thought, like, there's too many parking spaces. And there really is. There's 16 parking spaces for every car. I don't believe it, right around at 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was really blown away that South Pasadena is involved in the TOD. I had no idea. I live in South Pasadena, which is the most densely populated city in the most densely populated county in Florida, 3,300 people per acre. And that, I'm getting to my point is this. It seems like everybody talks and thinks in terms like North Pinellas and South Pinellas. We have coverage this, we have coverage that. From my perspective where I live, I see Pinellas, we say, okay, we got water on both sides. We have water on both sides of the beaches too. Now, the growth in St. Pete Beach, the governor has been taken off and it's going crazy. And St. Pete Beach will enjoy the same traffic problems that we saw in Clearwater. That's why I did the assist for the parking. I wanted to see how bad was it. So it's like, I see Pinellas County as two. It's not a north and south, it's the peninsula and it's the beaches. Until we get the beaches on more engaged, we're gonna keep missing opportunities to fix things or plan for things. There are 5 speed bumps into the beaches. There are 5 drawbridges. God bless those drawbridges. Please don't let them change to fixed bridges. They're traffic calming areas, believe it or not. I live right at the foot of the drawbridge. I'm going to tell you, I enjoy it. So we need to engage the beach communities more. They're acting independently, like St. Pete Beach is validating all this growth. And there's only 2 roads, really, or 3, in and out. The Corey Avenue Drawbridge, the Don Cesar Bridge, and north on Gulf Boulevard. So I just don't want to see this happen, what happened in Clearwater, happen to where there's a bridge everywhere. That's all my comment.
Thank you.
Conrad?
The 812 and the 62, can you look at adjusting those schedules? Because this is the dilemma. When I'm coming from Tampa on the 812, there seems to be like a 2-minute difference, and it seems to me like the people coming from Tampa that are gonna go to Boot Ranch should have the availability to then get on the 62, but the 62 wants to leave before the 812, and then if you can't get it hooked up, you gotta wait another hour, because the 60, you get on the 62, man, you just shoot right down all the way. You know what I mean? So can the 62 leave after, because it's only like, I think it's only like 2 minutes after the scheduled 812.
I'll put that into scheduling. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You got it.
Where is that intersection specifically?
The Boot Ranch.
At the
Oh,
Boot Ranch.
They need a longer break, they tell me, the drivers.
Yeah,
To go to the bathroom and whatnot.
And you know, so
60,
like.
must be 62.
62.
Yeah, so I mean, and that would be good too for the drivers, you know, so that's a good point. It helps them out too.
Yeah, it's a nice place to stop too. That's,
Yeah, I
you know,
mean, there's
really
a
convenient.
Publix there, there's
Yeah.
a lot of amenities and, yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
Jake?
Speaking of St. Pete Beach, what is since they seem to want to shoot down everything that PSTA does, what is the likelihood of them actually joining PSTA instead of getting, I know they're paying a little bit into PSTA for the buses, but
Very unlikely. It would have to be a public vote. It would have to be a public referendum for people to approve a property tax. Very unlikely.
because they seem to shoot down everything that PSTA
Yeah.
wants to do, which is for people who
So they
practically get the bus for free.
St. Pete Beach doesn't pay in
They're
their
not a
property
member,
taxes,
they're-
PS?
No, not at the Treasure
They
Island.
are not a member of PSTA. Treasure Island is neither. They both contract for
There
service.
is.
Hmm? Yes, Madeira is.
There is.
Representation without taxation.
Treasure Island.
Anybody else? Peter on the screen? You have a question? Come on in.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
In conversations just kind of around the beach area, I heard reference a couple times to something called the Big C, which it stands for something beach, government, communities. Anyway, it's, I guess I'm asking the question is this an entity that is very active? It kept coming up with conversations about discussions among the Big C, which sounded like it was a rump group of the mayors of the beach communities. Any information that could be provided to me, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, we'll send out to the entire committee some information. It stands for the Barrier Islands Governance Council, and it's a council made up of representatives from all of the Barrier Islands, and they are very active. They deal with all kinds of things, lately, short-term rentals, beach renourishment. They also have a representative on PSTA. They select a representative, who their representative is the mayor of St. Pete Beach. So I'll put something together and send everybody an email with some information about the Big C.
Bob, are those meetings open?
Their meetings are open, and they're almost always the same day and time as our board meetings. However, the Big C
okay.
meets the last weekend, we meet the 4th, so 2 or 3 times a year, they'll be on different weeks.
Okay,
Interesting.
thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else with questions, comments? Okay, with that, we're gonna bring this meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody, for joining here in person. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 18th, and it will be at 4 o'clock as always. And we will announce later on, or you can vote if you would like it to be on Zoom or in person. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
If anybody wants some Sunrunner temporary tattoos.
Oh, no.
Help yourself. And Sean, it's your signed autographed poster.
Can we get a picture of it together, please?
All right. I got nothing.
He does, he does, he does great.